All right, we are back with a new video, and today we'll be updating the Amazing Race 33 Power Rankings following episode 3, I guess. And obviously, this is a very weird situation to talk about. It's going to be a very weird power ranking to go through. And obviously, a lot of that is because of how the episode ended, with us finding out which teams have returned and which ones have dropped out. And I was pretty surprised by the outcome. So obviously, we knew from before the season that 7 teams would return following the break, and I, as well as a lot of other people, assumed that meant that 7 of the 9 teams that were still in the race would be returning. However, we got to the end of the episode, we saw the teams come in, and there were only 5 of the teams still in the race, and we could see it was Ryan and Dusty, Raquel and Cayla, Lulu and Lala, Kim and Penn, and Akbar and Sheri. Definitely a very interesting group right there. And Phil said that we would be having some familiar faces take up the other 2 spots. And while the preview tried to make it somewhat sneaky over who they would be, we could see from an aerial shot that it appears to be Arun and Natalia and Michael and Mo, effectively giving them a second chance and effectively making both of the episodes we watched non-elimination legs, kind of after the fact. So obviously, there's a lot to really dissect here, and and again, I'm surprised by the outcome of like which teams came back and which ones dropped out. But as usual, we're going to be going through these power rankings and assess these teams by how likely I think it is that they'll win the race. So starting off the list at what appears to be number 11 now, kind of weird to be thinking about that. We have a team who I thought was going to be Arun and Natalia. I thought we were going to be giving them a post-mortem. However, with what appears to be the new configuration for the rest of the race, obviously we're going to be talking about the 4 teams that have dropped out following the break. And at number 11, we have Taylor and Isaiah. Now, obviously, I had them ranked pretty low in last week's power rankings. Obviously, they were towards the back of the pack, and I'm not too surprised that they were one of the teams that dropped out. I mean, we didn't really see much of them on the show. Now, we don't really have confirmation over why they dropped out. Supposedly, it might have been due to COVID reasons. However, we don't really have confirmation. Anywho, again, Taylor and Isaiah were towards the back of the pack for a lot of the race. I mean, on this past leg, we saw them in. They got lost on the way to a roadblock. They were second to last to reach the roadblock, and ultimately the last to finish it. They were second to last to reach a detour, and obviously they were able to get ahead of Arun and Natalia to end up finishing eighth on the leg, which is pretty bad. I mean, towards the back of the pack. You couple that with how they did on the first 2 legs, with them getting an eighth place finish and a second to last finish leg, and obviously the fact that they were barely shown on the show. I'm not too surprised that they dropped out. I'm not surprised that they were a far stretch in terms of a winner candidate. So again, I like them on the race. They just weren't really shown much on the race, and they didn't really have a lot to do. So because of that, I have them here at number 11. Now we're moving on to number 10, and we have another team that dropped out during the break, and that is Cairo and Ray. Now, obviously, it's already come out that they had broken up during the break, so it's not too surprising that they didn't come back. And actually, I think Cairo moved to Serbia, I believe, so really made it unlikely for them to return. And it was definitely interesting seeing them in this past episode. I mean, obviously, we got a big storyline of them talking about their relationship. Obviously, they had a lot of trouble on the leg where Ray had a hard time working the car and stick shift. I mean, the car stalled out at one point. They got into some arguments. They actually didn't do that bad on the leg itself, where despite them being eighth to reach the roadblock and like they were able to catch up to ultimately be sixth to reach detour, and they finished fifth on the leg. So they did make a bit of a comeback. However, a lot of the episode focused on them arguing and sort of dealing with the different issues associated with their relationship. And I thought that obviously this were a normal season, I felt like that would have been more of a storyline the season where they learned to work through their issues. But obviously with them breaking up, it was kind of weird seeing this storyline play out regardless. Again, I felt like they were an okay team on the race. I mean, they were towards the middle of the pack for a lot of it. And I didn't think they were particularly likely to win. And obviously, with the news of them breaking up, I didn't think it was super likely that they would return either. So I had them here at number 10. Now we're moving on to number 9, and we have another team that dropped out during the break, and that is Connie and Sam. Now, apparently, the main reason that they couldn't come back is because Connie was pregnant and they were expecting to have a child. So obviously, they weren't in the best shape to return. However, I was a bit disappointed that they didn't come back. I really started to like them, and I felt like they were starting to find their groove a bit. I mean, obviously, they had a very rough start with them finishing seventh on the first leg, but obviously, they were able to kick it up in the second leg, finishing second there. And even on this most recent leg, I mean, yes, while they kind of slid a bit on their way to the roadblock and with them getting to the detour, they ultimately finished fourth on the leg. And I thought that was somewhat impressive for them. I felt like they were definitely a team that had a lot of potential to do well on the race. Now, granted, the edit kind of buried them a bit to where I didn't think it was super likely that they would win, especially in this previous episode. But they were definitely one of the teams that I was rooting for a bit more, even if I didn't think their win equity was super high. So I have them here at number 9. Now we're moving on to number 8 and the final team that dropped out during the break, and definitely the biggest surprise and the biggest letdown for me personally, and that is Anthony and Spencer. Again, I did not think that they would drop out. Now, apparently, what happened was one of them got injured, and that sort of prevented them from coming back. But this was a pretty big loss for the season as a whole, as they were definitely one of the top contenders for me on the race. I mean, on this previous leg, I said that they would have a bounce back after their seventh place finish on the last leg, and I was right. I mean, they were the second to reach the roadblock. They were third to finish. They were the second to reach the detour, third to finish, and they finished third on the leg. I mean, they definitely had the bounce back that I was expecting from them. And along the way, they were shown working with Ryan and Dusty to where I felt like they were well positioned to do well the rest of the race between their own ability on their own, but also that relationship with Ryan and Dusty to where I felt like both of them could have gotten to the final leg, like sort of helping each other along the way, but also supporting each other. And then having that final showdown, I guess. So to see them go out like this was pretty disappointing, in my opinion. I felt like they were definitely one of the more competitive teams, in my opinion. And with their loss, I mean, that definitely changes my outlook on the race moving forward. So, because of that, I have them here at number 8. And with that, we are now on to the 7 teams still in the race. And from there, I'll be ranking each of them by how likely I think it is that they'll win. So, with that, we get to number 7. The team that I think is the least likely to win is Akbar and Sheri. Now, like how I was surprised by Anthony and Spencer dropping out, I was pretty surprised that Akbar and Sheri returned. I mean, you have them being one of the older teams. You have their line of work, which is in education, and they really focused a lot on that in the premiere to where I thought it was going to be a direct obstacle towards them returning. Plus, there was the fact that they just didn't do that well over the first 3 legs to where they could have possibly thought that they had no shot, but they did return, and that definitely surprised me. Now, in terms of their win equity, I don't think it's particularly great. I mean, I think they really struggled a lot on this last leg where obviously they had trouble operating the stick shift. They were the last to arrive at the roadblock. They were second last to finish the roadblock. They were last to reach detour by a decent margin, mind you, and they were second to last to finish the detour. A lot of that because of Arun and Natalia choosing to switch detours midway through, causing them to obviously fall behind. And they even got lost on the way to the pit stop to where they could have potentially been one of the teams eliminated there. So I felt like they got a bit lucky there. But even beyond that, I mean, we saw in the first 2 legs that they were also struggling. I mean, they got lost on the first detour in the premiere. I mean, they had a sixth place finish on the first leg, eighth place finish on the second leg. I don't have a lot of confidence that they'll do well moving forward. Now, while they could potentially get by for the next few legs, potentially, I think that they'll probably be eliminated sooner rather than later. Plus, I feel like they don't have much of a storyline moving forward based on the edit. I don't feel too confident about them, both from a race perspective and from an edit perspective, or at least a storyline perspective. So, because of that, I have them here at number 7. Now we're moving on to number 6, and I feel a bit more confident about this team's overall racing ability, even if I don't think they'll particularly win. And it's a bit crazy that I say that considering they've been eliminated, and that is Michael and Mo. And I can't believe that I am still talking about these two. I mean, obviously, they were the first boot of the season. I thought they were done, but now it appears that they've been given a second chance. And while I'm happy to see them, like get to race a bit more, I don't think they're particularly likely to win. I mean, obviously, they were the first boot of the season. Mind you, I think some of that was due to bad luck with them having some issues with transportation and them getting lost on the way to the pit stop. I feel like their mistakes are a bit less notable to me than Akbar and Sheri's, which is a big reason I had them above them. But at the end of the day, I don't think they have the storyline for a redemption. I feel like Arun and Natalia are definitely set up for that more than them. And plus, I mean, even if I feel like they're more confident than Akbar and Sheri, I mean, they were still the first boot of the season. And while it'd be funny to see them win, I don't think it's particularly likely, especially given the field. And I had them here at number 6. Now we're moving on to number 5, and it's a team that I literally just mentioned. It is Arun and Natalia. Now, obviously, they had a pretty big episode, a pretty big blow up. And here I was thinking that I'd be talking about them at the number 10 spot, talking about all the issues that they had and all the things that led to them being eliminated. But in the end, it seems like they might get a second chance after all. So obviously, they had a pretty big episode here. I mean, from early on, they got a confessional about being fans and how Natalia's getting married soon and how the race was meant for them to highlight that. But then everything seems to go wrong for them in this episode. I mean, they're shown arguing over directions on the way to the roadblock. They're the fifth to reach the roadblock and the fourth to finish it too, and they seem to be in the middle of the pack, definitely seeming to doing well. But obviously, something's going wrong there. Where first Natalia chooses to help Connie and Sam after finishing the roadblock, which gets Arun pretty annoyed, and then they choose the barrel detour, which they were definitely struggling with. And Natalia again is like annoying Arun by insisting that they switch detours. They obviously do that, and that's the big reason that they fall behind, way to the back of the pack. And obviously, they struggle a lot on there. I mean, Arun particularly gets emotional over his bad performance on the performance detour, and obviously through that, really because they switched detours and picked the wrong one to begin with. That's a big reason that they fall all the way to the back of the pack, despite finishing third on the previous leg to be eliminated from the race. Or so we thought. I mean, obviously they've been given a second chance now. Again, the reason I have them above the teams we just mentioned is that I feel like they are better set up for a redemption arc moving forward. I mean, in the previous episode, at the start of the second leg, they had a confessional about how they're prone to arguing sometimes. And while that didn't materialize in that episode, it obviously materialized more here, which I was expecting to happen. Obviously, they got quite a bit of focus with them talking about their relationship. And some of that was probably due to the fact that they had a lot of difficulty on the leg. I'm not sure how much that will carry over moving forward. But I feel like compared to the two eliminated teams, I feel like they're more prone to a redemption arc. I think they've also demonstrated their ability to do somewhat well, even if I think they're very inconsistent as a team. But at the end of the day, I feel like the other four teams probably have a better shot of winning the race, and I feel like they're probably being set up to win more than Arun and Natalia are. So because of that, I have them here at number 5. Now we're moving on to number 4, and we have another team that I feel like has been set up for a redemption arc, and I think this episode definitely highlighted that. And here we have Lulu and Lala. Now, like I said, they were saved by a non elimination leg at the end of the last episode. But even then, I felt like they were definitely poised to have a bounce back. And I feel like the show was setting them up to be rootable underdogs. And I think we definitely got that in this episode where they definitely had a much better leg. I mean, first, I get a confessional about still being in the race, which highlighted the underdog aspect to me. But then they were the fourth to reach the roadblock. They were the fifth to finish the roadblock. They did fall a bit behind, getting to the detour at seventh, and they ultimately finished seventh on the leg. So definitely not the best leg in the world, but it was definitely a bounce back. And I feel like, again, I feel like they definitely have the storyline for them being underdogs. Now the question is whether they'll be overtaken in that regard by Arun and Natalia. That remains to be seen, but for now, I still think Lulu and Lala are poised to be the underdogs more so than Arun and Natalia are. However, at the end of the day, I feel like the top three teams we'll be talking about have demonstrated themselves to be better racers, but also having the storyline to potentially be the winner of the season. So, because of that, I have Lulu and Lala here at number four. Now we're moving on to number three, and this is my definitive top three. I feel very confident that one of these three teams will be the winners of the race. But at number three, we have a team who has a better track record than one of the teams we'll be talking about next. But I feel like they have less of a storyline moving forward, and that is Kim and Penn. Now, again, they've demonstrated themselves to be one of the stronger racers in the field. I mean, and this leg they just dominated. I mean, they were the first to reach the roadblock. They were the first to finish the roadblock. They were the first to reach the detour. They were the first to finish the detour, and they ultimately won by a pretty considerable margin as well. They really dominated on this leg. And again, I feel like they have demonstrated themselves to be one of the more consistent teams so far on the race. I mean, they had a fourth place finish on the first leg and a fifth place finish on the second leg, obviously winning this leg now. I feel like they'll continue to be a major force on the season moving forward. However, the reason I had them here at number three is that I feel like they have less of a storyline for them. I mean, yeah, we have that confessional of them talking about their viral video, and that's definitely something we've seen. But I feel like the top two teams we'll be talking about definitely have more of a story fleshed out, and I feel like the show goes more out of its way to highlight that story than them, while still having like some strong elements to their race. So because of that, I feel like Kim and Penn are at number three. Although if we're going strictly based on the race results, they would easily be number two for me. So I have Kim and Penn here at number three. Now we're moving on to number two, and we have another pretty strong contender for me. Mind you, I think they definitely have the worst results of the top three teams that we're talking about. However, I feel like the edit has been backing them up to a large extent, and that is Raquel and Cayla. Now it's weird to put them at number two here because they actually didn't have that great of a leg this week where they ultimately were in the middle of the pack for a lot of it. I mean, they were sixth to reach the roadblock, seventh to finish it, fourth to reach the detour, fifth to finish it, and they somehow fell behind in the time there and they finished sixth on the leg. So, not the best showing in terms of a team. However, the main reason I have them this high, regardless, is well, one, I feel like they've done relatively well in the first two legs. I mean, third place finish on the first leg and fourth place finish on the second leg, those are definitely merits to them. But the big reason is I feel like the edit has really been propping them up. I mean, we got so many confessionals from them in this episode talking about how they trust each other and how they're strong as a female team. I think the edit is really backing them up. And while they didn't have the best leg here, performance wise, I think the storyline is there for them to prove everyone wrong that they came in underestimated and that they'll ultimately come out on top. And I feel like that's such a powerful thing that's propping up their race, in my opinion, to where they will be major contenders and a major force. And the fact that they have more of a storyline than Kim and Penn is a big reason that I have them above them. But with all that said, I feel like the number one team has a trajectory storyline wise, but also have the results to back them up. And for that reason, I have Raquel and Kayla here at number two. Now, at number one, it is the same number one as last week. It is Ryan and Dusty. Now, admittedly, their edit was a bit quieter than Raquel and Kayla's this week, but I still feel like they have a strong storyline going for them with Ryan having been in prison and him wanting to experience life. I think that's something that will definitely carry them forward and something that will probably be brought up in future episodes. But the main reason I have them this high is again, they are the most consistent team still in the race. I mean, they had a very strong showing here where they were the third to reach the roadblock, second to finish it, third to reach the detour, and they were the second to finish it. And they ultimately finished second on the leg. So they definitely had the best results out of any team so far with two second place finishes and a first place finish. They definitely have demonstrated themselves to be one of the more consistent teams on the race. And even aside from that, I mean, we saw Anthony and Spencer helping them or at least working alongside them. Now, I did wonder whether Anthony and Spencer dropping out would negatively affect Ryan and Dusty, but at the end of the day, I feel like it'll ultimately help them as Anthony and Spencer, I mean, they're probably one of the toughest competition for Ryan and Dusty moving forward. And the fact that they're now gone from the race definitely opens up the field for them to potentially dominate moving forward. And again, while their edit was a bit quieter in this episode, I mean, I don't think it was all that necessary for them to be highlighted that much here. I mean, Raquel and Cayla still have the storyline of being underdogs, and I wouldn't be surprised if the show continued to demonstrate that edit throughout to where Raquel and Raquel and Kayla are ultimately up against Ryan and Dusty in the finale and take them down through that. However, I feel like until we actually see the lack of an edit from Ryan and Dusty, or maybe even some bad legs here and there, I feel like Ryan and Dusty are the clear front runners from a race perspective, and even from a storyline perspective. I feel like they definitely have quite a bit going for them. So because of that, I once again have Ryan and Dusty as the most likely team to win the Amazing Race 33. And there we go. That will do it for this week's installment of the Amazing Race 33 Power Rankings. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. I'll be back again next week to update these again once we have the results of the next leg. I have more content like this moving forward, talking about Amazing Race, Survivor, Big Brother, all the big reality shows. I'm very excited to cover them. But for now, that